Okay, members of council, if you can please take your seats. This meeting is now resumed.
That
Councillor Fletcher, did you have,
for a purple raincoat, if anybody has seen that.
pardon?
I'm looking for a purple raincoat that I believe I brought up here.
Is there a Prince joke in there?
No, not purple rain, purple raincoat.
I don't know where your raincoat is.
Well,
Yeah, if anybody has seen a raincoat? Purple. Okay, members of council, before we start, I would just like to acknowledge Lucy Triolsi, that's in the council chambers, former councillor. Lucy, welcome. Members, before we review the members' motions, are there any release of member holds? Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Page 4, EY 9.1, final report, Shoreway area study, secondary plan. I have a supplement report I'd like to move, and move the staff recommendations. I want to thank Neil Cresswell, our Director of Planning, Melanie, and our Chief Planner for helping Trillium get the proper wording in there for this secondary plan. So with that, I'll move the secondary, the supplementary report and the staff recommendations.
Thank you. So on page 4, EY 9.1, the final report for Shoreway area secondary plan, Councillor Grimes is moving the supplementary report amendment. All in favor? Everyone okay? All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. On page 5, item TE 9.84, expediting and prioritizing safety improvements to Lakeshore Boulevard and Bathurst Street, we have 2 technical amendments from staff that they have provided me that I can move and then release them.
Okay, does the staff have the...
They do. There is no bike lane in there. I did close the entire street for pedestrians, though. I'm going to vote against it.
They think you're joking.
Yeah, I'm not joking.
Okay, Councillor Cressy, before you move the amendment, you have to reopen a previous item, TE 7.123. Okay, all in favor, reopening the item? Carried. On the amendment, on favor, carried. Item is amended, on favor, carried. Councillor Baila.
Madam Speaker, I also have to reopen an item, IE 8.9, and staff is nodding me, so I believe they have the amendment. Staff has asked me to open this item in order to put an amendment to correct something.
Which item is it?
IE 8.9.
But what's the item?
It's not here. It was dealt with yesterday.
Bicycle lanes?
Yeah. My permit parking was completely removed by mistake, so we need to put it back, please.
Okay, so on the screen to reopen, on favor, carried.
No permit parking. We don't have permit parking.
Okay, and on your amendment,
Across the city for fairness.
on favor, carried. Clause is amended, on favor, carried. I've also reviewed a number of urgent motions to be added to the agenda. Councillor Bradford.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. If I could just speak to this very quickly. Reason for urgency is because conditional permanent development charge deferral is required to address a delay in receiving CMHC funding that has been committed to finance 95% of an open door affordable housing project. I've worked extensively with our legal team, finance, and building department for this motion, and it's asking for a 5-day conditional building permit and development charge deferral for this project. The building permits for this development are already ready for issuance as of 2 weeks ago, and the applicant will be paying the fees on that tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay, favor, carried. Councillor Matlow.
I'd like to move this, please.
Okay, do you want to say what it is?
It's a change to a new bike lane that's been put on the street to allow for parking that would also be consistent with the rest of the street. It doesn't in any way adverse the bike lane, but it allows for residents to continue parking on the street.
Okay, favor, carried. Councillor Perks.
Speaker, I have a motion that is urgent as any further delay would cause the owner undue financial hardship.
Favor, carried. Okay, that's it. Okay, we'll go through the members' motions. Oh, Councillor Bylaw?
I might want to try, I might release PH 9.3, temporary signs bylaw. On page 4, both Councillor Holliday and I have amendments, so if it's the will of council, we could probably release it as a quick item.
So, Councillor Holliday, you have an amendment? Okay.
We can ask the clerks to display the amendments. The first is the contracted services signs would have a limitation of 7 days to be displayed. You can see the change there. And the second limitation is the advocacy signs would have a limitation period of 30 days.
The amendments on the screen.
Not quick.
Not quick, okay.
Okay.
MM 11.1. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A 2/3 vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving pardon? Okay, all in favor of waiving referral, recorded vote.
Councillor Carroll, thank you. Councillor Crawford? And Councillor Fillion, please. Mayor Tory? Mayor Tory, may we have your vote, please?
The motion carries 21-4.
Okay, on the item. On favor? Recorded.
Counselor Perruzza, please. Counselor Perruzza, may we have your vote, please?
Council Perruzza, your vote, please.
The item is adopted 20 to 5.
MM 11.2. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 11.3. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. Recorded vote.
Counselor Cole, please. Counselor Perks. Counselor Fillion, please.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
And Counselor Wong Tam, please. Counselor Fillion, please.
The motion to waive referral carries 19 to 6.
Hold. Pardon? Okay. On favor of reopening to waive? Carried. Okay, let's vote again to waive referral.
Counselor Perruzza and Counselor Perks, please.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
The motion to waive referral carries 24 to 1.
Okay, Councillor Holliday has held the item down. MM 11.4. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Recorded?
Councillor Cressy, Councillor Bailao, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Karygiannis,
Councillor Grimes.
Fletcher.
Counselor Wong Tam, Counselor Carroll, please, and Counselor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
MM 11.5. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion relates to an Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario hearing and has been deemed urgent. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 11.6. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Pardon? Oh, I didn't hear it, sorry. On the item, recorded vote. On the referral? Okay, on the referral, recorded vote. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Councillor Karygiannis, please.
Councillor Wong Tam, please. Councillor Crawford and Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion to waive referral carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Lai, please. Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Karygiannis.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
MM 11.7. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Recorded.
Councillor Perruzza, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Cole, and Councillor Wong Tam, please. Councillor Perruzza, can we have your vote, please? Thank you.
The item carries 23 to 1.
MM 11.8. Notice, okay, can I ask for some quiet, please? It's too noisy. MM 11.8. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 11.9. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. Okay, do you want a recorded vote? Well, we haven't introduced it yet. No. On the referral, on favor? Waiving referral, on favor? Carried. So you'd like to hold the item? Okay. MM 11.10. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1111. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Infrastructure Environment Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, recorded vote.
Counselor Matlow, please. Counselor Bailao?
Counselor Crawford and Counselor Perruzza, please.
Counselor Bailao, your vote, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
Thank you. MM 1112. Thank you. MM 1112. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, recorded vote.
Counselor Crawford and Counselor Perruzza, please.
Counselor Layton, please. Counselor Caragiano.
The item is adopted unanimously, 22 in favor.
MM 1113. Notice of this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item? Hold? Okay. Counselor Bailao. MM 1114. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. Okay, on the referral, recorded vote. Okay.
Counselor Carroll, please.
Counselor Matlow. I have everybody on my side.
The motion to waive referral carries 18 to 4.
Okay, who said that? Okay. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong would like to hold. MM 1115. Notice if this motion has been given, this motion is subject to referral to the Toronto and East York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? I'm the only one that's supporting this. Recorded?
Councillor Ainsley, please. Councillor Matlow.
Whose? Nobody's in.
The motion to waive referral carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
On the item? Recorded.
Councillor Wong Tam, please. Councillor Cole.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Lai, when you're seated.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
MM 1116. Notice that this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the Economic and Community Development Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Wong Tam, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
Thank you. MM 1117. Notice if this motion has been given. This motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1118. Notice if this motion has not been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Etobicoke York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1119. Notice if this motion has not been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Scarborough Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of the item, of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1120. Notice if this motion has not been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the Executive Committee. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. Recorded? Recorded on the item.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
MM 1121. Notice that this motion has not been given, a two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1122. Notice of this motion has not been given. A two-thirds vote is required to waive notice. This motion is subject to referral to the North York Community Council. A two-thirds vote is required to waive referral. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. All in favor of waiving notice? Carried. All in favor of waiving referral? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Perruzza, you can answer your phone when you're in the council chambers. MM 1123. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agendas before council for debate. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1124. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda and is before council for debate. On the item, all in favor? Recorded.
Councillor Layton, when you're seated. Councillor Bailao. Councillor Bailao, please. Councillor Bailao, your vote, please.
The item is adopted 23 to 1.
MM 1125. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is subject to reopening of MM 10.24. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, the previous council decision remains in force unless council decides otherwise. All in favor of reopening? Carried. On the item, all in favor? Carried. MM 1126. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda and is before council for debate. All in favor of the item? Carried. It's already been done. MM 1127. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agenda as before council for debate. Recorded vote. Yes, it's before us.
Councillor Matlow, Councillor Karagianis, and Councillor Fletcher, please.
Councillor Pasternak and Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Matlow.
The item is adopted 23 to 1.
MM 1128. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agendas before council for debate. On the item, all in favor? Recorded? Recorded vote. Recorded vote.
Councillor Cressy, please.
Counselor Wong-Tam, Counselor Perks, Counselor Carroll, please, and Counselor Perruzza. Counselor Perruzza, thank you.
The item is adopted 23 to 1.
MM 1129. This motion has been deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is not subject to a vote to waive referral. This motion has been added to the agendas before council for debate. On the item, all in favor? Carried. Who said, oh, Councillor Wong-Tam, you'd like to hold it? Councillor Perks. Okay, that's it. Okay, we'll go back to the audit. AU 4.3. Do we have the Auditor General? Is she here? Okay, we'll wait for her to come down. Three, so we're at AU 4.4, which is the review of Toronto Transit Commission's Revenue Operations Phase 2 of Presto.
I don't know how this works. Maybe we're just...
If members of council have questions, please put your name up on the screen. Anybody have questions? All right, so Councillor Holliday, you don't have questions?
I'm not going to be speaking on it.
Okay, so you're just releasing it? Okay, members of council, there's a lot of talking going on, and I just want everyone to know what item we're at. Audit Committee 4.4. Does anybody want to speak on it? Okay, Councillor Holliday. Go ahead.
No, I won't be speaking to it, Madam Speaker.
You just releasing it?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Holliday is releasing AU 4.4. On favor? Carry.
It's not,
AU 4.5. Did, okay. Councillor Fletcher, questions on AU 4.5, safeguarding rent gear to income assistance? Councillor Fletcher, you have a question.
Yes, I just had questions about, the number of people that you said you looked at 500 cases? Did you pull 500 for the audit?
So we, for property, you're speaking for people potentially holding property. We pulled 500 cases that we thought were higher risk, and we looked at 20% of those. So it was around 60 cases, and then we found out that there was 15% that had issues.
How did you determine those 500? I think I'm interested.
So
'Cause there
we-
are altogether 66,000 people receiving RGI, and how did you determine that you needed to look at those 500?
So we matched them to properties within Toronto, the names, and then we understood the higher risk ones, and then we have a list from the highest risk one back.
How did you determine higher risk?
We just did a data match, Councillor, through you, Chair.
So you went to property owners and matched them to names, and you
Correct.
got a match?
Correct.
Of how many?
We had 500 that were potential, and then what we did was we took a sample of those and then went and got the land ownership records and all of the detail for each one.
Okay, just one sec. I'm going to put
Thank
your
you. Hold
time
my
on
time.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, please, it's very noisy in here. Please, everyone's talking. I can't hear anything.
Okay.
Okay. Would you like to
Have you
continue?
ever checked any addresses of any of housing providers against Airbnb website?
Councillor, not yet. We didn't, just time-wise, but that was one of the potential items that we were going to do, but we didn't get there.
Will you be following up and doing that?
We could, certainly, we could do that, yes.
Do I have to move that, or do I have your undertaking to?
We would have to get access from Airbnb to do that match, but, you know, we could attempt to do it. So we'll
think if
take
you
that
had
away.
the- I think if
You don't
you
have
had-
to make a motion, we can take that away.
If you had the addresses from, let's say, Toronto Community Housing in destination areas all through the downtown, you could look some of those up on the Airbnb website and see
We
if there
could,
was an
yes.
interconnection, correct?
We
Could you
could.
not do that? Pardon? Or any housing provider of any kind, to make
Yes, if
sure
we-
that,
If we had access to that information, we certainly could, yes.
Okay, hold on. I have to put everything on hold here. I'll stop your time. Let's have a quorum call. Nobody is sitting at their seats. Everybody's talking. Quorum call.
There's 13 in the room.
We only had 6 people sitting at their seats.
Members, we've opened the voting panel. Please indicate your presence in the chamber.
this is where I like to vote no.
I'm opposed.
I'm opposed to quorum.
Councillor Fillion, please.
Press yes if you're here. Physically.
Madam Speaker, quorum is present. There are 18 members in the chamber.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Fletcher, sorry I had to interrupt twice. If you want to continue?
Thank you, Speaker. So just interested, that's not part of this audit, but it is something I think there are a lot of people that are interested in. And here we are looking at what steps get taken then if you determine, or someone determines that there's income coming in that would take you off of being on RGI.
Through you, Chair, we take that case and we either investigate it ourselves or we provide it most often back to the housing provider, depending on their level of sophistication and investigation. During this audit, we went back to TCHC on some of those, and they were very, very helpful and diligent to follow up the cases once we identified the higher risk cases. So
Now,
we give it back.
What happens to someone who picks up a job for 3 months at Christmas, is on RGI? What happens to that person? Because they may not have a full-time job for a long time. It's more casual employment.
What they should be doing is reporting their income in to their housing provider during their normal rules. And if we looked at it, we would take that into account. It's not just at this point in time. We look at what's been on file for the entire year and then identify the ongoing cases of most risk.
But they could keep their RGI status, maybe. Do you know that, or should I ask that to staff?
You can ask for staff. My understanding is they would keep their status, but their level of payment would change a bit. That's what would
I'll ask
happen.
Mr. Rollins, since they oversee all of this. Go ahead, the answer.
Depending on the nature of the investigation, what was found, if there was a determination that someone was ineligible, then that subsidy would be removed. If there was an issue...
My question was if you pick up a job for a couple of months at
Correct.
Christmas and you're on RGI, what happens to you then? Are you maintaining your RGI, or are you now ineligible?
Thanks for the question. So depending on the nature of the income, your RGI calculation would change, which means your contribution to the next month's RGI rent would increase. If your rent increases above and beyond the market rent, you would maintain your RGI eligibility and pay market rent for a period of 12 months, after which time you would lose your eligibility. So it allows for fluctuations in income for people who achieve greater income through jobs or otherwise.
Is it 12 months or 24 now?
It's 12. It'll be changing for 20 to 24 months on January 1st, 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bala?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you. So this report was only looking at RGI units, correct?
That is correct.
So have you looked, for example, at the rent replacement units that we secure through planning?
So it would be the rent supplement units? Is
No,
that what you're thinking?
the rent replacement, which are required to have affordable, that are maintained affordable.
Just give me a second. Yeah, it was just RGI. I just wanted to confirm.
Just RGI,
Yes.
okay. In your recommendations, how did you take, how much of it or not, did you take in consideration the new legislation that is taking into effect January 1st?
Through the chair, the legislation, for the most part, doesn't change the eligibility requirements. The eligibility requirements will be the same. It simplifies the RGI rent calculation, but they still need to meet the eligibility criteria, cannot own residential property, must, like those types of eligibility criteria would still be the same.
But it can be only done on once-a-year basis, right? We're moving to a once-a-year basis? So if you have the 2-month employee, you really don't have to go and declare it. You just declare it the following year, correct?
That's correct. Under the new system, we'll be moving to once a year eligibility and review, with the exception if there's a dramatic drop of income of more than 20%, it allows for the recalculation of rent.
Oh, okay. One of your recommendations as well is to go to CRA and other ministries and ask for better collaboration. Do we know if we've done that already? Because I believed we have.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, they may have done it in certain instances, but it's actually, we didn't find it to be a regular thing. In fact, when we tried to do the same thing, the consent form was not what it needed to be able to obtain the eligibility information that we required. And so our recommendation is to fix the eligibility form and then where possible, make it an automatic check so you can do a high-risk eligibility checks on other items.
So I will follow on that in a little bit, but with regards to the centralization, I just want to make sure I understand your recommendation. And I'll tell you why, because from the experience that I have is that frontline staff is extremely important to actually get this information on the rent geared to income. So to have a system that is completely centralized and you actually don't have the superintendents and these people actually helping the tenants and helping them to fill out the forms, I think we might actually run a big risk of having a lot more arrears and to run into issues. So I just want to understand a little bit more what you envision this centralization system to be. Is it a support system for our housing providers, or is a crack down and we are going to do it all and you're out of the system?
So thank you. It's through you, Chair, it's a bit of a combination. So in our first report on rent geared to income and social housing, what we recommended was for the centralized waiting list, doing the pre-work to make sure those who get on the list are qualified. That saves a lot of problems down the road when you're checking their assets and you're verifying it up front, and that would be done mainly by the city since they should be doing the front end work. The information, as it's updated, to your point, the housing providers can assist that. It's just that we're housing it together instead of in like 200 different places across the city. So that's what we're doing. So it doesn't take away the provider. It's simply that when they get their documents, it's coming together. And they can review. So the city will be doing the analytics that we were doing. Which is which ones appear to be holding properties, which ones, so with the information together, they can keep doing that. So it should have, it's a combination.
Now, the two very last questions. One are asked to the CRA, and the second, how is our choice-based program? Can we actually expand it to have this capability? And I know that the tender, if it's not out, it's about, like we're about to award it. So can we work with the provider to have this done?
Through the Speaker, yes, we are working on income verification with a number of other divisions in the city that are also income verification based on their eligibility.
What's the time frame?
I actually don't know the answer to that, Deputy Mayor, but I will get that for you. The other part of your question was
choice-based system.
Choice-based, and the vendor that we're going with, absolutely, we have the ability to leverage that capability. So those two projects will come together, and we'll be looking at opportunities to create that synergy.
Thank you. That was your last question. Councillor Holliday, you held the item down. Do you speak?
No, Madam Speaker, thank you.
Do we have any speakers? Any speakers? Okay, would you like to release the item then? Oh, Councillor Bala to speak?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just want to say a few words.
Okay.
I do want to thank the Auditor General and thank everybody because we do have almost 90,000 RGI units. We have many thousands of housing subsidies, and now we have affordable housing. We're in the process, hopefully, of bringing in inclusionary zoning that is going to bring other affordable housing units. And to be awarding these units, awarding this assistance in a transparent and fair way, not just because you happen to pass by or walk by a building that happens to be for rent, or not being actually, deserving of the subsidy as per your income. I think it is really important. As a city, we're investing a lot of resources. We're revamping the way that we do housing, the way that we offer housing in this city, and I think this is a great opportunity to bring technology and to support our housing providers. But I do caution that this idea of the centralization I think we do need to centralize it and make it fair and equitable for all the housing providers. However, they play a key role in ensuring that we have that face-to-face contact with the tenants and support the tenants to make sure that we have the forms that we need. The last thing we want is to have a huge spike in arrears and to have people being evicted because they don't know how to fill out their forms because it's all done centralized. So let's make sure that as we develop this system, much needed, I'm all for it. I think that we're in a good way. I would just move it just a bit quicker if I could just speed it up just a bit. But I know that staff knows how impatient I've been around this. But I do caution us that it is really important to involve the housing providers in this discussion, to involve them in how we can ensure that this is going to be a process that at the end of the day is going to benefit and be transparent to the city, but the tenants and the people that need the housing as well.
Thank you. So on the item, on favor? Carried.
Didn't you have a motion?
Recorded?
Didn't you? Councillor Bailao, please.
Councillor Perks, please.
Councillor Fletcher? It's all right, Councillor Fletcher, we have your vote.
The item is adopted unanimously, 19 in favor.
Okay, thank you. Page 4, PH 9.3, signed bylaw review. So I know there's two amendments that were introduced, one by Councillor Holiday and Councillor Bylaw. Now, somebody had an issue with it. Who was it? Yeah. Let's go to questions to staff. Okay, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Perhaps to help explain the motion I proposed and pre-circulated, we're introducing a couple of new sign categories. Is that correct? Temporary sign categories.
Through the chair, that's correct.
So the report talks about, I'm going to just pick out three. There's a lot going on in the report, but there's three. There's one for home renovators. So that, if I can characterize it a little bit, is just a major renovation of a house. The general contractor or some other leader in that process will put a sign for a long period of time. And you're proposing that we permit those under our bylaws, which currently are not permitted. And that has a period of during the construction plus 30 days after the house gets occupied. Roughly.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, the second category is contractors. And I can't remember the exact words, but essentially it's somebody that's doing a renovation, landscaping, some sort of work on a property. And there's a proposal in here to allow the contractor to put a sign out as well. We see them all the time. They're those plastic bag signs. It says Jim's Landscaping, Brad's Roofing. That they're typical all over the place, and they're currently not permitted at all.
And we do not have regulations around them. I believe a lot of those companies believe they are as of right. We are introducing a category for them, so there are rules around them of where they can be located and what time period and what size.
Okay, and the proposal in the report is to allow those signs to exist for 30 days after the completion of a job.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Do we have a definition of what describes what the work has been, how do you describe work has been complete? We don't go to that level of definition.
Through the chair, no, we don't go into that level of, because it could be interior, and we wouldn't know.
Understood. And the third category of sign that's also new is what you've deemed advocacy signs. So we see those in different parts of the city. And to be clear, they're not the slow down signs. Those are handled differently. Those are signs that, let's say, a neighborhood has come together and said, we don't like this development, and sometimes you see those signs pop up on lawns for periods of time. And we don't have any rules, and we don't permit those under any rules at this point in time.
That's correct. Some examples of advocacy signs that you would have seen would, clean trains on a GO train transit line, no more jets, stop the cuts, slow down. Councillor Grimes had one yesterday for trick-or-treating for accessible.
Now, staff in the report are acknowledging that those signs can exist, and you've got some limitations on them in terms of size and such that are similar to the contractor signs, but you don't propose a time limit on those. So in essence, those signs can remain as is for an indeterminate amount of time all the time.
As written, that is how we have it. Yes, that's correct.
And at present, just to be clear to members, we don't allow them at all. There's zero permission to have those signs. And if my neighbor had a sign up that said, stop the development, and I didn't like it, I could call MLS and say, my neighbor's breaking the law, can you deal with that? And you'd have to go out and figure that out.
Through the chair, in simplest terms, yes.
Okay. And one of the principles in the report is trying to strike a balance between what we know are civil rights to have the ability to put up a sign, even though they're not allowed today. So one of the reasons why that you're creating a category is to create a permission so that this type of activity can coexist with the community.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And if you have no limitation on the presence of a sign for a period of time, do you have any enforcement that you can do on this if there's a problem with the sign or it's creating an issue?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If a sign creates an issue and is objectionable to a neighbor or there's some negative aspect to it, do you have anything you can do with the limitations that you put in here other than ensure that it's the correct size? And what I'm getting at is there's no time limitation that you propose, so you can't advocate for it to ever be taken down. It can just remain there in perpetuity.
Correct. Our rules are about location and size. Content is something that maybe the solicitor may want to comment on. There are charter rights on what can be included, and is also with the number of days. If we're to restrict the number of days, that may have a charter implication.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, questions?
Thank you. On the third category of signs that Councillor Holliday was talking about, maybe this is for the city solicitor, actually. For I heard from Councillor Holliday that his goal is to give a tool to MLS to be able to take a sign down if it's got a problem with it, but that's not actually what he's written. He's saying put a time period in it. Does the law look well on us using a time restriction to try to get at controlling speech?
Madam Speaker, any limit on the freedom of expression has to meet a test under the Charter, and that's called the reasonable limits test. It has to be tied to an objective, a pressing and substantial objective, and be proportional so that the limit is no more than is necessary to meet that objective. As a general rule, any limit that is focused on content of expression is judged more harshly by the courts than a limit that it addresses perhaps the form of the expression. For example, safety issues related to signs that are too large. Or
Councillor Crawford, could I ask you? So, right. So if the reasonableness test, if we just sort of say, well, we wanted a way to regulate these and we couldn't find a way, so we said you're only allowed to put them up for a limited period of time, that wouldn't be any kind of reasonable argument, or you probably can't think of a case where that's successfully been argued.
Madam Speaker, the limit, the reason itself would have to be tied to the limit. And I would caution against
the reason itself has to be tied to the limit.
That is directed toward content.
That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you. The reason has to be tied to the limit.
Thank you. Okay, do we have, oh, sorry, Councillor Fletcher, you have a question?
I just wanted to clarify something. At committee, I think I ran out of time. And it does talk about your private property, and I was trying to discern there that in many parts of the city, that the little front lawn that you have, much of it is actually right-of-way. And apparently, nobody will be able to put a sign on the right-of-way. Do I have that correct, or am I wrong?
For the advocacy signs, you have that correct. I understand your comments from committee, and we don't want to preclude someone from having them if they put it right up against their house. You had a lot of good arguments at committee that you may want to move a motion.
So I just want to run over that again. Yeah. So that is part of the city right-of-way, that someone mows the lawn, waters the plants. The city does not tend that right-of-way. How many meters is the right-of-way?
I don't have the exact answer, but it depends in different parts of the area. But
Well, what is it downtown?
It could be up to 2 meters.
Just 2?
I'm not certain on the.
Why don't we
property.
just figure that one out? It's quite 20 feet.
2 meters is 9.
Could you stop that clock while we get that right away, please? Oh, transportation, sir, here she comes.
Through the speaker, the size of the right-of-way downtown varies, but my understanding is it's about 10 meters from the center line typically, but often goes right up to the front yards of people, depending on the configuration, especially in many of the older parts of the city.
And do you go and mow everybody's lawn and look after the gardens and water the lawn that's a part of the right-of-way?
Yes. Yes.
We certainly maintain aspects of the right-of-way that were within our purview to do, but if there are behind the sidewalk or at the sidewalk as well, we are not responsible.
From the
for
sidewalk to the house,
Yeah, we are
that
not
section, that is the right-of-way. Do you water that? Do you maintain that? Do you grass seed that? Do you look after it? Or does the homeowner basically look after that?
The homeowner does. We do maintain some boulevards. We certainly maintain
Not a boulevard.
catch bases and basins and all of that.
The boulevard, sidewalk, house.
We do not.
Between the sidewalk and the house, the city does not maintain that section. The homeowner has to maintain that section.
That is correct.
So I'm just, do we not find that odd that somebody cannot put an advocacy sign on the very property that they're maintaining on behalf of the city?
Through the chair, understand the challenge. We're not trying to be restrictive, but we are trying to limit the number of signs because these can, as written, they can be out there for 365 days, 1 sign per property. And part of the intent from the stakeholders was to minimize the number of signs.
Oh, the stakeholders. How many had right-of-ways that were they tended? How many came from that section where the right-of-way is part of their job?
So through the chair, I couldn't speak to that specifically.
So is that discussed? The fact that the right-of-way is actually being tended by the homeowner because it is part of their lawn?
Through these consultations, it was not discussed.
That was not discussed, and yet you've
Specifically.
brought a recommendation here of that kind. I'm going to ask for you to help me with the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. So I had it's 2 motions on 1 page. I have them displayed. They were pre-circulated, but I placed them. The first is to put a time limitation on the contractor signs of 7 days. The key in this is it doesn't hinge around the idea of when the work is complete. I think it makes enforcement much easier. I don't have a problem with a contractor putting a sign out for a week to advertise the work they're doing. The concern I have is if my neighbor is renovating their bathroom and that renovation goes on for a month, and that contractor leaves and the sign is out for another month on top of that, I'm looking at a sign for all summer. So I felt that 7 days would be a reasonable time period, and it's something that's practical and available to enforce, understanding that the sign is permitted 0 days today. So I think this is a step forward. And the same logic goes forward on the advocacy signs. They're currently not permitted at all. They can be out for 0 days. And so a period of 30 days might be a good first step. And where the 30 days came from is that is roughly similar to what we allow for election signs, which is a similar concept. And my concern is that the current regulation doesn't get us a whole lot, because we've got the advocacy signs out there right now that are de facto existing there in perpetuity. And bringing in some definitions around the size of the sign still allows them to remain in perpetuity. And I think if we're going to roll out these changes, we should take some small steps, start with 30 days, and see how that works out in the community. So I hope that these councillors find these as reasonable limits as we create changes in new categories out there. And you know, if another councillor wants to suggest that we take a look at this after a year or a year and a half, I didn't build that in the motion, but it might be worth seeing how it rolls out. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question for you. Clarification, 3 minutes. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I just need to clarify. Are you saying that if you contract someone to do work on your house, however long the work takes, they can only put their sign on your lawn for 7 days? Is that what this motion says?
Correct. The way that I read the regulations is, and from the questions that I got from the executive director, is they really don't know when someone starts and stops the work, because they could be in the house working on something, so pretty hard to enforce. So I think a policy around just having an absolute of a certain number of days that it may be out. And if we're talking about what the report describes as some landscaping work, some small renovations on a house, roofing, that type of stuff, those jobs generally only last for a few days anyways. So a week period of time gives some certainty to everybody that are impacted by the sign.
I hope you'll see this as clarification, Madam Speaker, because it really is. Have you ever renovated a kitchen?
Most certainly.
So if the contractor is in your house and there's an actual permit pasted in the window for 2 months, you're saying he can't have his sign on the lawn at the same time that the permit is stuck in your window?
For the same logic, I think if you ask the next door neighbors if they want to look at a sign for 2 or 3 months long, I think that becomes a bit excessive when we talk about public policy. So if somebody's doing a small job, having a sign out for a week to advertise their work is a decent first step, considering we don't allow them at all. And I think it's a reasonable limitation that balances the concerns of everybody that would be involved with the sign, not just the renovator, not just the homeowner, but also the residents in the neighborhood.
Do you not, well, you know what, Madam Speaker, I'm just going to address it in my comments. I'll be speaking to this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pasternak, you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just following up on Councillor Carroll's questions here. Now, you say a maximum of 7 days. If the contractor takes the sign down after 7 days and then puts it up again 2 days later, does that restart the clock to 7 days? Is this?
I mean, the fine throws of the policy are probably best addressed to the staff on how they'd enforce it, but to me, if the contractor is working on a contract, it's 7 days.
So it's consecutive 7 days? Yeah. Or a total of 7 days?
It says 7 days.
7 days in
I'll
total?
allow the staff to interpret how they figure that out, but 7 days out of, you know, I don't know how long a contract could last. If you're cutting grass, I suppose that contract could start in May and go till October, so you know, the current proposal says that that sign can be up from May till almost December under those existing rules, because that's what a grass cutting contract lasts. So I think that gets out of balance, and to put an absolute limitation on the time period that the sign is out there, I think is fair for everybody that may be concerned.
And do your amendments in any way impact the Municipal Elections Act? Or our bylaws regarding elections?
I don't believe so, because these only pertain to the categories that are listed, and one is the contractor category and one is the advocacy. We know election signs fall outside of those.
Okay, so based on the research of this motion, it would not impact any of our...
To the best of my knowledge, and if somebody else knows something to that effect, I'd love to hear about it.
Thank
That's
you.
not the intent, I can tell you that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks to speak.
Thank you. I'm going to address myself to Councillor Holliday's motion, particularly the second part of it. As soon as you begin to tell people what they can and cannot put on their lawns in terms of advocacy, you run into the very thorny issues around how people are allowed to express themselves in our society. And in our society, there are moments, there are a few, where you're allowed to restrict speech. And in every case, as you heard from the city solicitor, the thing you restrict has to reflect your purpose in restricting it. There is no argument that can be made anywhere that you're only entitled to 30 days a year of speech. It's a ridiculous way to try to get in the back door. When staff developed this policy, they put some restrictions on the size of the sign because there are issues we have in terms of making sure that drivers can see, you know, what's around the corner, and that we don't have all of our front lawns cluttered with giant signs ruining the urban form. But saying that you're only allowed to have an advocacy sign for 30 days is absolutely indefensible. It's completely wrong, and you should just vote no on Councillor Holliday's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Well, Madam Speaker, I hate to pile on, but I'm going to speak to, we've heard someone speak to part 2 of the motion, and I've reviewed it, and I concur with Councillor Perks, but I want to speak to part 1. I don't know if I'm living in a different neighborhood and maybe people have a different attitude. I'll tell you what does bother people when you're doing a renovation in a house. The thing they don't like looking at is your dumpster. They don't like looking at the mess. They don't like looking at the material piling up. What gives them comfort, while they watch your house being ripped apart, what gives them comfort is that permit sign that has to be posted in the window. And I gotta tell you, when they see the contractor's name and the architect's name sitting on a sign on the front lawn, they are comforted by the fact that this is not a fly-by-night job. This is going to be a decent renovation, and our neighborhood values will be intact, or our neighborhood value, property values will be intact. And so we let contractors post signs on lawns. The recommendation, I'm sorry, councillors, I'm having trouble hearing myself think.
Councillor, please.
Yeah. The recommendations that staff put in this report take into account the realities of doing work on these types of properties. And I think if we're really clear on this, there are all sorts of things about renovation that neighbors are bothered by, but the comfort of knowing a credible contractor, an architect whose websites you can get on right now and make sure they do good work on your street where your house is something they actually look for. Asking that contractor to remove it within 7 days really achieves nothing except to cause concern with your neighbors. And so I can't actually vote for either part of this motion. And I'm sorry if in my 2 minutes I bored you, Madam Speaker, but I'm in at less than 2 minutes.
No, I was just wanted to put your time on hold to tell everybody to be quiet. It's so noisy in here.
Well, then I guess I bored everyone, but I won't be voting for the motion.
So did you want to continue, Councillor?
No, Madam Speaker.
The only reason I interrupted was it's very noisy. I'm trying to ask councillors to keep it down.
Then I apologize for being short-tempered, but what I will say, Madam Speaker, is I expect the lack of attention is because I'm not the only one who won't be voting for this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bailao.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, also have an amendment. So we've been working with TREB on some of the bad apples that we have in terms of real estate agents that abuse real estate signs. And so TREB has committed to work with our staff to create a system that there's more cooperation, that they're also going to take it into their own hands to penalize these people that are not following the rules. We've been working with them, and we've worked on this suggestion as well on their side. I have to say that they've been extremely cooperative. They really want to get to the bottom of this issue as much as we have, and so this is a very collaborative approach that we have, and I hope I can get your support.
Okay,
because
hold on, please, I'm sorry. Councillor Karygiannis, please. You're very loud. I'm sorry, but I could hear you. No. Yeah. Okay, sorry, continue. Continue, Councillor, sorry.
Thank you. So, yep, as I was saying, I hope I can get your support. Like I said, these are initiatives that have been worked out with the industry, and we're all trying to get to the same place. The vast majority are people that are doing excellent work, and they too get pissed off with the ones that are not following the rules. And we just want to make sure that we all collaborate towards getting into the same place. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor
Lai has.
Councillor Lies, you have an interest?
Just a point of order. I'm going to be declaring conflict on this one because I do have a real estate license still.
Okay. State the reason.
Okay.
She did.
I do still have a real estate license.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right now.
Okay, Councillor Pasternak to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Regarding Councillor Holiday's motions, I won't be supporting this maximum of 7 days. It is inherently unenforceable because by the time the complaint comes in and a municipal license enforcement officer goes to visit, it'll be well past 7 days, probably 14 days. Then there's a compliance time of 2 to 3 weeks, and then there's an opportunity for an extension. At the same time, it's important to realize that many of the renovations done across the city are done by small business owners. They're the ones who are usually family businesses, sole proprietors. They are the engines of the economy. And I don't think they're asking the sun and the moon to have their sign out there and their name on someone's property indicating that they're doing work on site. I think that business needs the support of government and doesn't have to be undermined by government. And I think it's important that we support these mom and pop organizations, these small businesses, by allowing them to post their signs. And I don't think we should be adding more stress on our municipal licensing or municipal enforcement officers who are already stretched to the limit now on a short-term regulation that will be almost impossible to enforce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pasternak. Councillor Cole?
Yes, I'm just wondering whether we as politicians are basically going to be restricted to this advocacy sign limit of 30 days. Maybe we all have conflicts here. And I guess, do we all have a conflict of interest here?
No.
I was just wondering. Could we have legal comment on that?
Well, questions are done, Councillor, and staff have left the floor. You have the floor.
I'm going to declare a conflict. Since I'm elected officials, I put up signs. I can't speak to this item.
Yes, that's true. I'm sorry. I was taking advice from the clerk. Can you finish that? You're finished speaking, Councillor Cole?
I declared an interest. I put up signs.
Okay, that is fine. For the record, Councillor Cole, the city solicitor does not advise individually on whether or not. That is up to you to interpret.
Just to be safe, I'm declaring a conflict of interest since this
As per your own interpretation, I just want to clarify. Thank you very much. Okay. That saves some minutes, and now it's Councillor Fillion's time to speak.
Thank you. I don't think I have a conflict. I'll speak briefly just in case, but just on I'd like to separate the two parts of Councillor Holliday's motion. The first one I will support because it has to do with private signs, and as much as we would like to help small business, we really don't want public property being used for a proliferation of signs, and I think 7 days is good enough advertising. At some locations, when someone's building a new house, for example, you can have 10 or 12 companies coming and going, and you just have a big whack of signs. So I'll be supporting the 7 days on the commercial signs, because I think that's in the public interest. On the other part, though, that's members of the public expressing their point of view, and I think we want to encourage that. We don't want to put limitations on that. So I will vote against the second part of Councillor Holliday's motion as not being in the public interest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fillion. So, councillors, Councillor Fillion has asked that the motion from Councillor Holliday will be voted on in two parts. Councillor Fletcher, are you ready to speak? Oh, actually, I think Councillor Fletcher might be the last speaker. They don't. Is it likely to take a long time? We actually don't have a procedural bylaw that requires a seventh inning stretch, although we certainly seem to need one. I'm just going to give the clerk a couple of minutes to decide. Okay, so Councillor Fletcher, I'm going to stand you down in the order for a second because Speaker Nunziata wishes to speak to this item. Oops.
Thank you. I just wanted, Councillor Perruzza, please.
Yeah, councillors, there are just two more speakers on this item. If we could have a quiet chamber.
I just... Including staff? I just wanted to express my concerns as well with this item. But the problem that I have, and nobody is, I don't know why it hasn't been mentioned, it's not the signs that are on the lawns as much as it is these signs that are put up on traffic lights and hydro poles, people advertising for renovations and plumbing that continues to be up, and we're not removing these signs. That's the problem, an issue that I think that should be addressed, because those are a nuisance where you see all these signs just taped up on hydro poles and advertising business or so forth, and that's not, I don't know if that's part of this bylaw or not, but I think that this is an issue that should be addressed rather than the signs if someone's doing renovations on their front lawn. To me, that's important to me, and I think that at one point we need to introduce that bylaw as well, if it's not included in this, because if you see them everywhere, traffic lights, on hydro poles and gardens, and people just advertising their business, and it's there forever until someone removes them, and we don't remove them on city property, and they're all on city property, and we're not removing these signs. So I just wanted to express, those are my concerns when it comes to signs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fletcher, your motion is ready, I believe.
So,
are you ready to speak?
As soon as I know that the clerks are...
Yep, they're ready for you.
I can just start speaking and have it come in a minute. Thank you. Thank you. This is just, I'd like to have this referred. Why is it going to that committee? Came to. Oh, for a report to Planning and Housing on the advocacy signs. So I'm sorry to do this, but we keep running into this at all times because one size does not fit all. And I spoke earlier and asked questions about that right-of-way that is half somebody's lawn, not, it's just ridiculous that somehow you can't have an advocacy sign on part of the city property that you maintain 365 days a year. So if we can't do that, then I think maybe Ms. Gray's going to have to look at taking over all of the right-of-way maintenance throughout parts of the city that have large rights-of-way.
Come cut my grass.
And there's places that have tiny little spots, then you're going to get caught, then you're going to get fined, and it's just not worth it. This is something we had to deal with the election signs. You couldn't have something near an intersection. Well, in Councillor Kirigiannis's ward, there's large swaths of property at an intersection. In Councillor Wong Tam's ward, there's no property at an intersection. So people were having their signs taken away by MLS saying those are illegal. We have to understand the different types of property across the city so that everybody has the same access and that it's fair. So I hope that you can support this. I don't want to belabor this. I just want to get this particular piece fixed. Thank you. Yes.
You have a question by Councillor Holliday?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
you.
The way I read this, it refers the entire item back. I just want to make sure that's your intent.
My intent would be only to refer the section, but I've been told by the clerk that I can't only refer that section. I would prefer to just send the advocacy signs and let's get that fixed up, but apparently legally we can't do that. And so I'm sorry that I didn't have more things prepared today, but again, we're back on that however many meters there is of a right-of-way with the small lawns. So I do hope you'll indulge me, Councillor. That's all we'll be dealing with there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Okay, so can we put the motions on this? Okay, we have the motion by Councillor Fletcher to refer. On favor? Recorded.
Mayor Tory and Councillor Cressy, please.
The referral carries 17 to 5.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you. So now our next item, Councillor Matlow, T 9.4.
This is the Bathurst Street item. Yeah, this is a technical amendment by staff, which I move. And so I move the item with the amendment.
Okay. All in favor? Carried.
Took away 5.
Now we'll go to the members' motion. Oh, item is amended, all in favor? Carried. Okay, members' motions that were held down, page 5, MM 11.3, Councillor Holliday.
Thanks, Madam. Maybe you didn't even know you could.
Councillor Holliday?
Yep. Thank you, Madam. Questions of staff, please.
Questions to staff?
Thank you. I wonder through you, and I believe it's to the city clerk, if I can just get a bit of quiet in here.
Which one are we on?
I just wondered if the raising of the Moroccan flag as proposed in the motion is consistent with the city's flag raising policy, and if it is not, could we explain why? Could you explain why, Madam Speaker?
Madam Speaker, the flag-raising policy endeavors to permit as many flags and as many requests by community groups for the raising of those flags to be permitted. So as of right, people may request one flag raising per year. What happened in this case is that the Moroccan flag had already been raised once in September, I believe, August 31st, actually. And then there was a subsequent request to raise the flag again at Nathan Phillips Square for November 17th. As happened, another group had requested that the Polish flag be raised on November the 17th, so the flagpole was not available. But the policy indicates that there is to be a request by one a year.
Is the request for raising the Polish flag meet all of the criteria? Has it been approved? Are the dates all in sequence? So one request came ahead of the other.
Yes, that's correct, but I point out that the Nathan Phillips Square flagpole is no longer being requested in the revised motion. The request is now for Mel Lastman Square, and that can be accommodated.
So I want to understand, is the, and this is the purpose of the questioning, is the raising of the flag going to offset another group that has a request in place? Or are we just dealing with the waiving of the policy to allow two raisings?
Well, the request is to waive the policy for the second flag raising, but at Mel Lastman Square, there is no conflict.
So, Madam Speaker, the clerk brought up the issue of the Polish flag, and I just wondered how that was germane to this discussion.
The initial request was to raise the Moroccan flag again a second time at the Nathan Phillips Square flagpole. That flagpole was not available because a request had been granted in the interim to raise the Polish flag.
Do you, Madam Speaker, through you to the clerk, do you have any concerns with straying from the policy, and is there any precedent that council should be aware of that is going to put us into a very difficult position in the future on being able to accommodate the variety of requests?
Yes, the policy, I believe, should be upheld to allow one request per group, because a number of groups have already asked for, at least in some cases, one additional request, in some cases, two additional requests, and have been denied in accordance with the policy. So yes, there is a danger that these groups will all come back and ask for the same requests.
Given the number of flagpoles we have in our policy, could council find itself in a position of where it is going to be very difficult to be fair to a number of groups if we begin entertaining more than one flag raising request in a given year?
Yes, I believe that it could find itself in that position.
And just to clarify and to surmise or summarize the advice of the clerk's office is that council should not waive its policy in this case for very practical reasons.
That would be our advice, although, as indicated, the other flagpole is available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Karygiannis, questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just for clarification, the group that is right now requesting to raise the flagpole, they raise the flag at the flagpole, for how many years were they raising their flag before at Mel Lastman Square?
Through the Speaker, we don't have the exact, I don't have the exact number here, but this group and the group that was provided the flag raising on August 31st have both been previous requesters and have both had been permission to raise the flag.
Would you be surprised if I was to sort of convey to you that they've been raising the flag for the last 20 years?
I don't have that information with me, Councillor.
Okay. So I've attended their flag raising as early as in the mid-90s. This new group that raised the flag in August, how long have they been doing it for? Last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? How long?
Through the Speaker, I don't have that information on either here. They have, we have it that, I do know that they have previously requested and have been approved.
So they were approved the last year. Would I be
They've been
incorrect?
approved for this year, yes,
Okay.
and they've been approved
So
for previous years.
basically what happened, the Moroccan community, along with the Moroccan Consul General and the Moroccan Embassy that raised the flag every year, were late in applying, and the other group applied before them, and therefore, hence, we're at this position right now. Would I be correct?
Through the Speaker, yes.
Okay. So the Moroccan community, along with the Consul General and the Embassy, are applying every year, but this year they will not be allowed to raise the flag on the Moroccan Independence Day unless this motion goes forward. Correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Out of curiosity, because like you indicated that the Polish group that was raising the flag has done it on this particular day in the past as well.
Through the Speaker, I can't say that it's exactly the same day. Many groups that come in, they do select various dates. Some of them try to do with a local event that they're doing with, or they want a weekend, or it's whatever the organization works on it. So this group, the Polish group, came in, they met the criteria, and they were approved.
And what are they acknowledging with their flag raising?
Their Independence Day.
So we have 2 Independence Days that have raised their flags before. Is this on the Polish Independence Day?
No, it's not on the, through the Speaker, it is not on the actual date. But we don't, our policy doesn't require that it has to be, the current policy does not require it has to be on the actual date.
Has any effort been made to try to swap the days? To put it, to move one to another day that may have equal or greater significance?
Through the Speaker, no. In that case, part of this issue is that it's a second request.
Okay.
On that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday to speak.
I'll just be brief, Madam Speaker. I heard some very compelling information from the clerk, and this is a really difficult one. We've had a number of items come forward on country flags to council, and sometimes they can be quite divisive. But I am really worried because I am knowledgeable enough to know that there's a limited number of locations that flags can be raised. And it's not like the Moroccan community didn't get a flag raising at all. They've already had a chance to have one in September. And I recognize there's some other groups competing for that opportunity. But according to the clerk, everything has fallen in place from a policy perspective. And the clerk expressed concern regarding a precedent here. And I'm worried that if we grant this, it's going to be really hard to say no in the future to other groups that come forward and say, well, I've got a second and third day that I'd like to raise my flag. So I can't support this break of the policy just because I think it's going to be unsustainable in the long run. And I think it's really important that council treat people fairly. And I really hope it's not taken as a slight to the Moroccan community. I don't mean that in any way. It's just a matter of, as a city council, we've got to be fair to everybody, and we need to be careful about what we grant to one group when we won't be able to fulfill it to other groups. And, you know, I respect my colleague, Councillor Kayajanis, for bringing the request forward for the community that may have approached him on it. But I think council needs to think carefully about where we're stepping now and what this will mean over the next couple of years as we get other groups that will come by asking for an exemption as well from the policy, knowing full well from the clerk that we're just not going to be able to live up to that. So I just think we should be fair and consistent and exercise a lot of thought as we go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Indeed, you have to respect staff and what the work that we have given them to do. In speaking to Protocol Office, I think they're in a position right now to revamp the old archaic flag raising requirements, and they were looking forward to bring something to council. What this says right here is one community that every year, along with the Consul General and their embassy, raise the flag on Independence Day. We have a policy that says if another group, nonprofit organization, comes before the community group, well, they get to raise their flags. So we have a splinter group, a group that comes in and says, we want to raise the flag of the Moroccan king and on his birthday. And yet we sly the community. Can you imagine if we were to do this to the Chinese community when they want to raise their flag on October the 1st? 750,000 Chinese, or even better. Try to do that to my community, the Greeks. Or if we're going to use that mentality, why don't we just say to them, look, you know, you don't have to do this. We're not going to allow you to have the parade. And then my colleagues, they will not be able to participate in the Greek community parade, or the Italians, or anything like this. This is a community that did not have an opportunity to put their application before the other community. So the only thing that they want to do, go back to Melasma Square, as they've done every year, and raise their flag. And yes, there's colleagues over here that say, well, we shouldn't have any flag raising whatsoever. Guess what to those colleagues? More than 57% of our community is visible minorities. Close to 80% of Toronto are people that are first or second generation, people that have come to this country. We're going to say no to them. You can't raise your flag. We cannot celebrate Greek Independence Day, Chinese Independence Day, Polish Independence Day. Come on, folks, let's get real. Let's allow this group that has been raising their flag every year to do so again this year. Thank you.
On the item, oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll speak really briefly. I'm supporting Councillor Karygiannis' motion. Originally, there had been some conflict, and I was talking to the clerk's office. There was some conflict because they were fighting, the two groups were conflicting over the City Hall flagpole, the pole here. And this motion was amended to move the Moroccan flag, quite appropriately, up to North York. So there's peace in the valley. We have been able to honor the Polish community and the Moroccan community. So while there might be some disagreement, felt disagreement, this is pretty much settled, and we should all be supporting this, and everyone's happy, so we should just approve this.
On the item, recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted 20 to 1.
On page 6, MM 11.9, Restoring Neighborhood Improvement Area. Councillor Carroll, you held the item down.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I was just typing something. Yeah, I had questions of staff.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to be clear of staff's interpretation of the scope of the motion, because the name of the motion really talks about restoring status to a particular neighborhood, but the motion talks to doing an evaluation of the neighborhood improvement area program. So which is it? What was staff's intention in the first place? Or did they have an intention? Thank you, Councillor Perks. I'm at an advantage over Councillor Perks because I've spoken to staff offline. Did you have an intention to evaluate the whole program? How about if we put it that way?
Through the Speaker, yes, Councillor, there was always an intention to evaluate Toronto Strong Neighbourhoods 2020. That activity will happen next year in 2020. We will reevaluate the designations and process used to establish NIAs across the city.
And to do the evaluation, it takes a certain amount of time to gather the data, because this has always been a data-driven and an initial study-driven, and then staff recommend to us who the neighborhood improvement areas are. So that's going to take a certain amount of time. So does fulfilling this motion really become it just folded into the evaluation that was coming in 2020 anyway, and we'll just wait till then?
Through the Speaker, yes, Councillor, that would be the intent of staff, is that this would be folded into the evaluation and review process that we had planned for 2020.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Carol asked my question.
Okay. Councillor Holladay.
Yep, I'll be really quick, Madam Speaker. I'm just flipping for the motion, but I just want to, this does say Scarborough on it, but I just want to make sure that this is going to include Etobicoke as well.
Through the Speaker, yes.
And specifically the concerns I had, and they've been standing for a while, is the Etobicoke Centre neighborhood is really large, and I'm not sure the size of it captures the diverse sections of it. And I did note in one of the earlier reports to Council on children's services, there was a carve-out in central Etobicoke, and it stood out as a neighborhood in need of some of those services. So could I take a bit of assurance from this discussion that, you know, you'll be looking across the city and you'll include the neighborhoods that I represent in your assessment in the future of whatever we designate as neighborhood improvement areas?
Through the Speaker, yes, Councillor, we'll be looking at the entire city and at individual and specific neighborhoods.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To speak, Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to give some of the background on why this motion was brought forward. There was a really fabulous report that was published by John Stapleton and his colleagues, and he's a social policy expert. And what he did is he looked at the methodology that we're using for our neighborhood improvement areas, and he looked at the data that we're using. And one of the things he looked at is that we're deciding on them based on income. And he's proposing that we may want to look at this by looking at income minus shelter. And the reason for that is that in many areas of the city, they don't have Toronto community housing, and they're spending a lot of their money on rent. And this is really a personal issue for me, because this is how I grew up. I grew up in a rental building in Toronto. We didn't have a lot of money, we had a lot of love, and there was a lot of poverty in our building. But it wasn't a Toronto community housing building. And we have this throughout a lot of the city of Toronto. And we need to have a look at that, and we have to look at, should we be using shelter costs as a metric? The other thing that we need to look at is, should we be looking at commute times as a metric? Because areas of North Scarborough are spending a lot of time commuting to their places of work. And in many cases, they're working multiple jobs. So there's a term I learned about earlier this week that I think is really important and we should think about as we do the neighborhood improvement area designations. And it's time poverty. And they're time poor in Malvern. They were time poor in the neighborhood where I grew up. And that's because people are working multiple jobs. They're spending all of their time on the bus. And it's extremely, extremely hard to get ahead when you're living that kind of life. And I was very lucky. I was born to teenage parents. And when my mother when I was in grade 4, she went back to school. She was able to get a loan. She went to college, but she also worked a part-time job. And my father, he spent a lot of time commuting and working really hard to make ends meet. And we paid our rent, but there wasn't a lot more than that. And there certainly wasn't nutritious food every day that we spoke about on Monday. So this is the rationale behind this motion. It's not just looking at income, but looking at all these other determinants that say whether or not you can get ahead. And we were really lucky. We got ahead. And I was really lucky because I was able to live at home, I was able to work 2 jobs, I was able to pay for myself to go to school, and I have a very, very happy life. But that dream is not easy for everybody to access, and we need to think about that as we go through the next neighborhood improvement area. So I just wanted to give you the background that was the rationale and the thought behind this motion. I wanted to thank John Stapleton for having another look, because yes, I believe in evidence-based decision-making. But we need to look at the metrics that we're using. We need to look at the data that's available, and we have to continually evaluate if our methodology needs to be updated. And this might be one of those cases where we need to have a second thought, to look at the methodology that we're using to define our neighborhood improvement areas. So I just wanted to share that background with you, that this is where this comes from. It comes from a good place of good intention. It comes from a report that uses evidence that says, hey, we might have to look a little more closely at North Scarborough and other areas of the city. And another area that we might need to look at was in a motion that was brought forward by Councillor Tam Wong, motion MM 9.26, that was looking at the St. Jamestown. And that is a very similar problem, I think, that we have through North Scarborough. So hopefully through this important reevaluation that's happening next year, we can look at these areas of the city that, again, have high rents. They may have a slightly higher income than areas where we have Toronto community housing, but overall, it's very, very hard to get ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
So, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to speak to for a moment. I hadn't read the report from Mr. Stapleton. The motion stopped me because, you know, I can give actually even a little more background to the background that Councillor McKelvey provided us with. I have a couple of tower block neighborhoods in my area that if we had only used income, we could even have used housing times income in 2005, then the Peanut and Parkway Forest would surely have made the grade. But in fact, all the social determinants of health were a part of the evaluation. The level of service was part of the evaluation. And I stood in this chamber and made a speech that I resent when I'm struggling so hard with some of the issues that are going on right now in the Peanut. I'm being penalized by the fact that some women councillor who preceded me through the ages in municipal government put a rich supply of childcare into that neighborhood. And subsequent MPPs put a community health centre in, and bam, I'm off the list. No priority neighborhood for you. So I've been doing the work on my own, and I can't complain. I really can't complain, because I've been able to do that because it also happens to be an area of development growth. And so what's needed to be done, I've done with the community benefits that come from development growth. And so if we did another evaluation, I don't know that I'd make the grade this time. But there's been priority neighborhoods, then we had the review that led us to the neighborhood improvement areas, and the update where we started to pull them apart and concentrate in some other areas. And I might still not make the grade because I've only added more service. We now got a food hub that's even dealt with the hunger issue. But all of these are considerations. Data is gathered to measure all of those things. It is not just measured by income. The good news about this is Councillor McKelvey, while she has challenges, we all have challenges in our neighbourhoods where incomes are lower. The priority neighbourhood that was Malvern was actually one of the more successful organizations in the beginning. They actually had a really good priority neighbourhood action committee, and they actually did achieve some things. And so they're getting there. In an evaluation, they may end up having it restored, but I really held the motion not because I want to begrudge Malvern anything, but because I want, as we've had going along, a look at all the determinants of what makes a healthy neighbourhood, and then an evaluation that comes from professional staff to tell us whether or not these are the places where we should target the lion's share of our resources. And I want to flag for staff that I will be looking for an extra chapter in that report. One of the things that we were promised, if you are not in a neighborhood where you have the designation, the knowledge of what works that is developed in those areas, the promise was we're going to target in these areas, and what we're going to learn, the knowledge we're going to gather about what works and what can surgically make a big difference really quickly in a neighborhood will make its way out into the areas who may not have the designation. Participatory budgeting is one of the ways I'm doing it in my neighborhood. I'm using whatever works. But I'm looking for that every time there is an evaluation of neighborhood improvement areas. If I don't win the sweepstakes and get a designation, I want the chapter that tells me, what are you learning in those neighborhoods that's going to make its way to my neighborhood where there are low-income communities that need quick supports, maybe not the whole program. So I hope that is a part of the evaluation that's forthcoming. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Yes, I want to congratulate Councillor McKelvey for her passion and certainly her very thoughtful motion, which I think makes us all reflect on the diverse needs we have in our wards, and that's why I think this evaluation is critical, and that it not be done in a silo. And saying there are winners of a sweepstakes and losers of a sweepstakes. I don't think that's the approach that should be taken. I think it's about looking at the whole of the city, and there's variation of needs, and there's variations of challenges, and it's not all based on where you live. It's based on a number of factors that she's pointed out. I know I have the largest public housing community in Canada, Lawrence Heights. It's been a designated neighborhood, and it is challenging. It's much larger than Regent Park. It is, listen, it's not always about Regent Park. There's also other parts of the city. That's my point. So there are neighborhoods that have been traditionally looked upon as high needs, and we've applied resources there. And I also want to mention there are marginal neighborhoods, like in my ward, I have an area called the Lotherton Pathway area. It's on a railway track, built by a developer in the 70s who built high densities, sold them as condos, and then walked away. No amenities, no facilities, zero. They have a rec room there that's basically condemned because of mold. So therefore, there's nothing for the residents of Lotherton. But they always come to the city and say, the city has got to put in facilities. The city's got to put in a pool, a splash pad, a recreation. Well, the city can't because it's private property. So I spent all my time dealing with the condo board, and the condo board is basically dealing with its own issues. So there is an area with working class people that many of them came from Vietnam as boat people. They've gone on to university, they've gone on to great careers. Now the grandparents are still there. So what about places like Lotherton? How are they going to get help as we look at this designation? Then I've got another area which is also sort of lost in the shuffle, and that's the Marleyville area. In the city of York, before you were mayor, Madam Chair, built one of the most densely populated high-rise communities in Toronto, right at Marley, north of Eglinton, on the Allen Expressway. Anyways, they built about 10 towers, no rec center, no pool, no park, nothing of a public amenity anywhere near Marleyville, with all these towers and no public. So they don't get any designation because there are people, there's condos there, there's rental buildings there, there's low-rise rental buildings there, all jammed into one corner of the city with no supports whatsoever, recreational, social, etc. So that's why I think this is a very important motion to make us reflect on, as we do this evaluation of what the needs are in different parts of our city, that we do a wider scoped evaluation and looking at many different variations of what we think are neighborhoods or communities in need. So I'm sure we all have those same types of unique and challenging neighborhoods, but I think with a little bit of help, added help from the city, we could really help a lot of people succeed. But right now they're getting marginal help because they haven't been at all identified as an area of need. So maybe we all have to make sure we plead for these neighborhoods, and that's why I support Councillor McKelvey's motion, because she's trying to do that, and I congratulate her for trying to do that.
On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Cole, please. Councillor Perks.
The item is adopted unanimously, 21 in favor.
Page 7, MM 11, we're almost there, MM 1113. Councillor Bala, you held the member's motion down. Do you have questions to staff?
I do. So we've created a process to place shelters, drop-ins, fairly recent, correct? A new
Through the
process?
Speaker, that's correct. In December 2017, Council approved a process on how we select these shelters.
So has staff, does staff have delegated authority on this item?
So yeah, that's correct. My position, the Deputy City Manager, has a delegated authority to select the sites, provided there's funding in place within the budget, the site meets the requirement of the city's shelter and zoning bylaws, and that it's included in the annual shelter infrastructure plan that we bring forward for council approval every year.
So if we don't change that process, can we really tell you to stop or pause or tell you what to do in respect to that?
Okay, just one sec. Okay, hold on. Councillor Carroll, Councillor Cole, please. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So through the Speaker, currently that authority is delegated to the Deputy City Manager.
Okay. And how are we doing in terms of capacity right now? Like, would you say that we really need these spaces that we're working on, that this is part of actually the commitment that we've done as a council on the shelter system?
Occupancy levels and demand continues to be very high, so we're continuing to focus on expanding the shelter system by the 1,000 beds that Council approved last year. So we're slowly trying to add those beds into the system to try and relieve some of the pressure that we're currently facing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. With respect to the Downtown East Action Plan, that action plan was largely constructed and devised with the various stakeholders in consultation with the community, but all the divisional staff to try to respond to the epidemics, the crisis that was taking place in the Downtown East around the lack of housing, the lack of adequate supports and structural deficiencies and gaps around community service provider. Is that not correct?
So through the Speaker, yes, we worked with a number of community stakeholders and partners to analyze what was happening in the Downtown East and formulate some strategies and actions together among all the partners and how we can help mitigate those impacts that we're seeing.
And is it not correct that within the Downtown East Action Plan, there's the hiring of a full-time position, a coordinator, to make sure that the different agencies as well as the city divisions will be working better together? Is that not correct?
So through the Speaker, currently all that coordination work is being facilitated through SDFA, Social Development, Finance and Administration.
And they were going to create this collaborative forum that would allow for readily available information to be shared, to be disseminated, and also to then determine the next level of service planning, and to make sure we are where we need to be. Is that not correct?
Correct. That forum has been established, and we meet with the stakeholders on a very regular basis.
And with respect to that forum and the regular meeting, do you get into the granular conversations about which facilities are performing well, which facilities perhaps are underperforming, how to introduce new services, when new services are appropriately to be introduced? Do you get into that level of discussion, address by address or perhaps street by street?
So through the speaker, not street by street per se. We have a discussion on what we feel the gaps are in the downtown east, how we can build capacity within existing services, and if there's any additional services that can be brought in to help mitigate some of the impacts we're seeing.
And is the downtown east, does the downtown east carry a significant portion of social services that are used and accessed citywide?
So through the speaker, we're seeing a lot of residents that need supports within the downtown east with multiple challenges, and yes, there's a lot of services within that area to try and provide those supports.
With respect to the relocation of the Adelaide Women's Resource Center, what were the criteria that led the staff to determine that that was the right location for this new facility and service?
Through the speaker, we looked at a number of criteria. Some of the was size. We also looked at buildings that were already zoned for such use, because that is an as-of-right use. We considered whether or not the building was for purchase or for sale. We considered the extent of the renovations that would be required to provide the service that would be required in that location. We also considered the people that would be using the service. The majority of the women using the current location are from that general area, and so finding something in the vicinity that they would be able to access was also high on our list.
And when the community found out about the potential relocation of the Adelaide Resource Center to 233 Carlton, that was done by by the release of a delegated approval form that came from Real Estate Services to the local BIA. Is that not correct?
No, the delegated authority form is posted online.
And so it was posted online, but the BIA, so that was not given to them by the Real Estate Service staff?
No. I'm not sure how they get the delegated authority. It's posted online whenever real estate purchases a building to notify that they have exercised that delegated authority. If someone were to search the address, they may find the delegated authority, but it's not something that is sent out or shared.
Under the process, and recognizing that this is a resource center, not necessarily a shelter, but under the shelter process that was adopted by Council in December 2017, does this particular facility qualify for that process in terms of engagement, or does it sit under a different process?
There actually is not an approved process for drop-in centers. In fact, when we opened the original Adelaide Resource Centre and the partner agency Sistering in the West End, there was no consultation at all at that time. It was responding to an urgent need. However, this time we are using the shelter engagement process to make sure that the community is engaged and is in a position to successfully integrate the service.
Thank you. That was your last question. Councillor Fletcher.
Have you, so there is no process for drop-in services. At what point did you initiate the engagement process for the shelters that we use?
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, if I could just clarify, for this
You said there's no process for drop-in services. We understand there's quite an elaborate process for shelters that Councillor Bailao and I worked on.
Yes.
And what point did you initiate the engagement process for shelters around the Adelaide drop-in?
So we're just in the early stages at the moment, Councillor Fletcher. The program itself is not anticipated to be open till the end of 2020. Our typical engagement process begins about 6 to 9 months prior to the opening of the location, where we engage a community liaison committee. The early engagement that happens at this point in the process is reaching out to local stakeholders to identify what are the types of issues or concerns that the community might have, so that in developing our engagement process, we ensure to take those things into consideration.
So how did the BIA get that letter?
I'm not aware of how they received. I don't believe they received a letter.
How did they find it?
I don't have that
Did
information.
you tell me it was posted on the website?
The delegated authority forms are posted on our city website.
So you don't have the delegated, let's be clear, if I understand it. You haven't initiated any process, but somewhere along the line, Real Estate Services has posted a delegated authority on a public website. Am I right to just put it like that?
That is correct.
So I'm not sure how that that tells me that there's a process already, because it's now posted. Who's in charge overall of the rollout of the engagement, including understanding that the delegated authority letter is posted on a public website?
So the General Manager of Shelter Support and Housing is responsible for the overall consultation process of new sites.
Are you aware that posting something on the city website is initiating a process? It's already initiated at that point. Would you agree with me?
Yes, I would.
So there has been no, but you don't have a process to catch up to that. You're only going to do that now.
So that's
Something's missing in our process. Would you agree with me?
I think there is there's a disconnect between the type of engagement that a community is seeking around the siting of a location and the type of engagement that we want to do around the integration of a new program. But every time we do a engagement process with a community, we learn something new and we put that into the process the next time. We're always interested in how we can improve those processes and learn.
Thank you. Councillor Bylaw to speak. You held the item down. She's not here. Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Bylaw to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to be very short. There's a lot of work happening in this neighborhood because there is a very high concentration of services in the neighborhood. But I think what we have in front of us is actually to make it better. Make it better in two senses. We have a shelter system that is stressed. We are working very hard on not only responding to homelessness in an emergency capacity, but actually doing it more on the basis of a prevention and with the supportive housing that we need. We all know that those are the long-term solutions, but this council has committed to the 1,000 beds. This council has committed to creating the services that are in front of us to make sure that when we have the winter in front of us, that we have as many of these beds, as many of these drop-ins open as possible. We actually have done a new process to engage communities, to address the services of the communities. I think we need to fine-tune those processes. I think we need to learn from these experiences, listen to the communities that we're working with. But I think it is really important that we move ahead and we open these services and we serve these communities as much as we can. That we work with the local community and that, above all, that we make sure that people in the shelters and in the community have the services to address these issues that the city is very, very difficultly facing. So I hope that we can have the support. I know that there's some amendments coming to the motions, but I think it is important that we move ahead with this work and that we provide the services that this city and our residents so desperately need.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much. If the clerks can please put the motion onto the screen. I will be amending recommendation number 3 and inserting simply that the Deputy City Manager of Community and Social Services is to expedite an engagement process regarding the establishment of the drop-in at 233 Carlton to make sure that local residents are informed of the decision-making process and that the relocation is not going to necessarily attribute to any increase in vulnerability of service users. And I do this, Madam Speaker, largely because I recognize that recommendation number 3 originally contained in my motion is procedurally out of order. The matter has been delegated to staff, and rather than us not voting on it, I would rather us vote on something that will allow the community to be better engaged moving forward. I've also escalated the matter so that it actually now sits with the Deputy City Manager and not necessarily the General Manager of SSHA. I want this work to begin as soon as possible. And Madam Speaker, I will tell you that the good people of Toronto Centre are very agreeable, I would say, to recognizing that we all have a responsibility to take care of those who are most vulnerable. But it also needs to be noted that the good people of Toronto Centre, especially those who reside in the Cabbagetown Moss Park area, they are also living with a disproportionate number of facilities and services, which is why in 2017, along with my friend and colleague Counselor Troisi, who's joining us today, we both advanced a motion that specifically talked about how do we create a downtown action plan that will pull all these services together. So therefore we can actually encourage agencies to not work within silos, but also work better across sectoral divisions. And we have done significant work. The 12-month action plan actually helped move that dial where we are able to bridge some of the service gaps and also have service providers talk to each other and deliver service more efficiently. Earlier this year, Council has now adopted a 5-year service plan that will bring us to 2023. This is a significant document that brings significant investments on trying to once again streamline the service provision in the area. So it was quite surprising, Madam Speaker, to recognize that we had put all this work together to make sure that all the divisions and all the agencies were coordinating and communicating with one another. Then all of a sudden we're being told that there's a new service that's being relocated from one corner of St. Lawrence Market into Cabbagetown, and then Cabbagetown is going to receive a new, and then the St. Lawrence Market is going to be receiving a new shelter. All of that outside of the Downtown East Action Plan. All of that outside of any real conversations that was formal at any standing committee. And it has everything to do with the fact that the communities of impact need to know in advance what's coming in so they can also inform the process. I've now spoken to residents who are asking, why did this happen when here we were having them at the table, coming to the stakeholder meetings to work together, and then all of a sudden, this surprise. And so it is very difficult to establish trust because this is not a NIMBY community. I've got 2,000 shelter beds in Toronto Centre. That's more than all of you. So this is not a community that doesn't do its own. They carry the weight of the city on their shoulders. But to be asked to come to a table to work on devising a communication and collaboration strategy cross-sectoral, to then to be surprised is, I would say, erroneous. So we need to clean that process up. That process was not, is grossly flawed by every account because they should not have been notified by a way of a very technical document that was posted on a city's website that they didn't understand what was happening. And to be quite honest, neither did I. So we need to be able to regroup and make sure that the community comes forward so that they can get the information that they need, and they need to do it as soon as possible. And so if that means that our Deputy City Manager, it escalates to your office, I have every confidence that you'll be able to bring all the different parties together and then to actually bring forth an engagement plan that will work, that will be clear, that will be that will be well articulated, so we will know what service is coming into Cabbagetown and also what service is then going, what additional new service is coming to St. Lawrence Market. And I'm sure if you were to treat the communities with that level of respect, with intelligence, they will respond accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Yes, I'm not going to take too long, Speaker, but I just want to thank Councillor Wong-Tam for her leadership here, and do understand that you do represent a very caring and giving community that has a lot of vulnerable residents and a lot of shelters, a lot of drop-ins, and that Adelaide Women's Centre or Adelaide Women's Drop-In is a really important place for women in the coldest nights of the year. They actually end up staying there in order not to freeze to death on the street. And so while this has all been delegated to staff, and that was one of the changes that came about through our looking at how we can be more successful in establishing shelters and establishing 1,000 beds across the city, and that would be a delegated authority. It doesn't appear that the start here is making this successful. The whole idea is to be successful. It's not can I or can't I, can you or can you not have that. We're going to be doing that, but how do we have that conversation with the community? So somehow you have a lot going on. You have your East Side Working Group that's dealing with many things, and you've got shelters, you've got people moving, you've got George Street, Seton House, and you also have some fantastic leadership in the community. I know the young BIA is a fantastic leader when it comes to the situation that people find themselves when they're homeless. And they were very helpful in establishing the new protocols for establishing shelters. I'm a little surprised to hear that technically this isn't a shelter, so we don't have to follow the protocol. That's just a bit odd to me. It obviously is a change in the community. It's worth thinking about how to do that in the most sophisticated, friendly, and successful way. So I'm just concerned that this has started off in this way. I'm very glad that you've been able to have discussions with the Deputy City Manager. I think when something goes off the track, that's the level that it has to be fixed at, and that the community is part of a conversation, that those folks who are champions and understand the importance of these facilities and how to work with providers, service providers, are at the table helping others along. It's a process that we set in place, and I guess I'm pretty disappointed that it's starting off in this particular way. We shouldn't be surprised that people go on the website and find things, for goodness sakes. Of course, once you post something on the website, now you've started something officially. So that needs to be part of the plan. It doesn't appear to me that there's a plan here. So I'm confident that there will be very short order and a good plan, good community outreach, good conversation, and I look forward to this being a successful venture rather than one that is headed in an unfortunate direction. So thank you again for your leadership, Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, if we can put the amendment on the screen. By Councillor Wong Tam. All in favor? Carried. Did somebody ask for recorded? No. On the item as amended, all in favor? Carried. Our next item is on page 7, MM 1114. Deputy Mayor Min Wong, who asked? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Item as amended, recorded vote. Okay, sorry, I can't hear you. Maybe we should have everybody have something at their desk they can bang on their desks. I don't know, or a buzzard or something.
The item as amended is adopted unanimously, 23 in favor.
Okay, on page 7, MM 1114, Deputy Mayor Minawong, you held the item down.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you have questions?
No, I'm told the local councillor has a motion, so or Councillor Wong Tam has a motion. So
Okay.
I'd like to hear that and then
Okay.
go from there.
Councillor Wong Tam?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to acknowledge that that the mayor's office and the mayor himself was very instrumental in helping me reshape the motion. Largely, it keeps so, oh yes, and if I can just ask the clerks to put that on the screen. So in essence, it keeps the spirit of the motion that was originally drawn in before you, but it does some technical tweaks, and that includes asking the city manager to work with the city solicitor and consult with the LGBTQ2S+ stakeholders to review the city's policies regarding the governing of use of third-party bookings, and to make sure all of that work and all those policies actually align with the city's human rights and anti-discrimination policy, and then to report directly to City Council in the first quarter of 2020. I was advised that perhaps January 2020 was too early, that they may need a little bit more time to do the fulsome community consultation. And then, of course, to then continue that work and extend it across not just the city facilities, but also the facilities that are managed and operated by the Toronto Library, so that the Toronto Library has their policies that align with the city's anti-discrimination human rights policies as well. And then for our council to reaffirm our commitment to the city's human rights and anti-discrimination policy and the protection of residents from discrimination, harassment, and intolerance, especially those who are living with homophobia and transphobia targeted at them. And Madam Speaker, I just want to say I recognize that this has been a very difficult discussion, largely played out, I would say, in the public media, but also in the social media circles. I have personally heard from friends who are very hurt on the particular matter. And I want to just acknowledge that that hurt is something that we need to be mindful of, and that hurt comes from the fact that they have, especially for those who are trans and non-binary people, that they are especially hurt because they felt that their city and more importantly, their beloved Toronto Library institution didn't back them when they needed to. I actually don't think that there's any villains in this particular matter. I believe that our friends who sit on the Toronto Library Board, including our chief librarian, was doing what they thought was in the best interest based on the policy and the legal advice that they received. And so I'm not casting dispersions on anyone, but what I do think we need to do is to make sure that as a city, and especially one that is the most diverse city in the world, we do everything we can to strengthen our policies to protect the most vulnerable people in our city. And that includes those who are specifically named and protected under the Charter. And that includes people who are in equity-seeking groups. And so that's all this motion is doing. We have a long ways to go, to repairing the relationship with our communities, especially those who are trans and non-binary, and those allies and families that love them. That is going to be work that's yeoman's work that belongs to this chamber, as well as those who are operating the best public library system in the world. And we have to find a way to come together to fix that. And I do not agree with the position of the library board or the chief librarian. With all due respect, I didn't agree. But I do think that they have every right to govern and manage the facilities, because that was their mandate and that's the job we gave them. And if there is a process to evaluate that, then let it be this one, and let's find a way forward to fix this so it does not happen again. Thank you.
We do have questions for you. Councillor Holliday?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just for clarity so I understand, because it's a lengthy motion, does Part 1 apply to the library?
The Part 1 specifically applies to city policies governing public spaces.
Right.
And I would say that the library, I mean, there should be no confusion that we're talking about the Toronto Public Library. But if you take a look at the body of my motion, there was also a very alarming event that took place where we had a street preacher and a YouTube personality that had booked the Pam McConnell Aquatic Center, and he was running church services out of that facility. So we could do a better job all around in tightening who we book space to and who we do not.
So could I I don't think I got an answer. Is Part 1 including the library?
My intention is that Part 1 should include the library. Part 2 specifically talks about the library board, working with the city manager to review their policies, to make sure it aligns with the city's policies.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Pasternak, question, clarification?
No, I'll withdraw my questions, thank you.
Okay. So on the motion? On the amendment? Recorded vote. Did I hear a recorded vote on the amendment? Yes. I know, but somebody else has asked for the amendment. Okay. Recorded vote. This is the item. Pardon? Yeah, the whole motion was amended, so it's a new item.
This has the effect of replacing the original, so we just get.
Yeah.
Councillor Bailao, please.
Councillor Perruzza and Councillor Pasternak, please.
That was a very classy speech.
Oh, trying to wash that.
Microphone.
The item is adopted 20-1.
Okay, on page 9, MM 1129, 245 and 285 Queen Street, Councillor Wong Tam, it's your motion, you held it down?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I did hold it down because I wasn't sure if staff had any more changes. I recognize the motion's been revised twice, and I never got a chance to speak with planning staff once again, so, and if they're not here, perhaps we can just let it go.
Okay, on the item, MM 1129, on favor, carried. MM 1130, Councillor Matlow, you just want to move it? Oh, yes, to move this motion is being deemed urgent by the chair. This motion is subject to reopening of item IE 6.12. A two-thirds vote is required to reopen that item. If reopened, the previous council decision remains in force unless council decides otherwise. All in favor of reopening? Carried. On the item? On favor? Carried. MM 1131, Councillor Bradford, would you like to move it? On favor? Carried. MM 1132, Councillor Perks, would you like to move it? On favor? Carried. Councillor Bradford. Okay, members, before I ask for motion to enact the general bills, may I have a motion regarding the consideration of submissions on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments? Councillor Bradford, you have a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, that the committee and council consider submissions in making a decision on zoning bylaw and official plan amendments.
Thank you. On favor? Carried. Councillor Wong Tam, you have a motion to introduce certain bills.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I do. That leave be granted to introduce bills 1457, 1459 to 1489, 1491 to 1496, and 1498 to 1515.
Okay. Shall leave be granted to introduce these bills? Recorded vote. After we do this?
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion to introduce the bills carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Filion, please, and Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Perruzza should not be on his phone during
Councillor Perruzza, can you please get off the phone? You're not supposed to be on the phone in the council chambers. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah.
The motion to enact the bills carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
It makes a difference when he's talking and you could hear it. Councillor Wong-Tam,
Yes, thank you much. very much.
you have a motion to introduce certain bills.
I do. That leave be granted to introduce Bill 1490.
Shall leave be granted to introduce these bills? Recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
Councillor Filion, please, thank you.
The motion to introduce the bill carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
Deputy Mayor Min Wong and Councillor Wong-Tam, please. Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Just close the vote.
Councillor Wong-Tam, could we have your vote verbally, please?
So are you going to change it? So the motion to enact the bill carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Mr. Matlow, you have a motion regarding absentees.
Yes, that City Council excuse the absence of Councillor Jay Robinson from the October 29th and 30th, 2019 City Council meeting.
Thank you. All in favor? Recorded vote.
Thank you. You haven't done one of those in a long time. I've never done one of those.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Motion to authorize Councillor Robinson's absence carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Councillor Cole, you have a motion to introduce the confirming bill.
Yeah, I move that leave be granted to introduce the bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council Meeting 11 on October 29th. Meeting 11 on October 29th and 30th, 2019.
Thank you. Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote.
Councillor Crawford, Councillor Carroll, and Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
The motion to introduce the confirming bill carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? Recorded vote.
The motion to enact the confirming bill carries 22 to 1.
Okay, thank you to members of council, staff. Meeting is adjourned.